Say hello to a new friend on an old road. Take a two-lane trip of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.
Hey, good morning, my friends. Glad you could join us. We have Professor Nolan Stolz waiting in the wings with us this morning. We're going to be talking road trips. So we've got some great music there from Joe and Woody and the boys of Road Crew 66. Take a gander at their music, roadcrew66.com. We're going to be talking about road trips and interesting places. Some road trip inspiring stories. It is going to be another warm one here. It just popped up on my computer there this morning. Excessive heat watch, which means we've been running for about 4 weeks, 5 to 10 degrees above normal. But, well, it's a matter of perspective. As hot as it is here, you can get down in the Colorado River Valley and, well, I won't go so far as to say it's hell in the summer, but if you squint hard, I bet you can see it from there. On a serious note, it's going to be a tad bit warm, but you got to expect that here in the desert country. And for us dry roasted nuts, well, it's part of life. Well, we spend a lot of time talking about Route 66, and Route 66, it's a focal point. It's been a part of my life since, well, late 1950s. But I think it's the gateway drug. There's other great two-lane highway adventures. And one of them that I've been obsessed with is US 6. And Professor Stolz has just had an adventure in the Northeast. Got to explore a bit of US 6 and some other two-lane highways. Professor Stolz, how are you this morning, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you.
It's always great to visit with you because, I find your adventures, and you share these on YouTube and your Patreon page, just absolutely fascinating. The history you come up with, and the way to inspire road trips. You find the most interesting places, and I guess you just did a trip there in the Northeast. What states did you get to cover?
I started where I live, South Carolina, and then went through North Carolina, which for you geography buffs is north of South Carolina. And then you get Virginia and Maryland, Pennsylvania, New York, and then I ended up in Vermont.
That makes for a good road trip. I've covered most of this country, except for the far south of Florida and the Northeast. So I'm really, really curious about that country. I've never made it up that far yet.
It's a beautiful country. It's a very different vibe, and it's very northeast. Like I look, like when you live on the coast, you just think north, but all the highways and all the mountains and everything all travel northeast, and then. And I'm like, wow, this is taking longer than I anticipated because you're going, further east than, where Georgia or Florida would be. The Pacific Ocean is the Atlantic Ocean is directly south of you. So it's really in this far corner, and it's, isolated in that sense. And they have their own culture and architecture and ways of doing things.
Yeah. And it's old. The towns up there, except for New Mexico, most places in the United States, well, out here in Kingman as an example, we think of the 1880s, maybe the 1860s and 70s. And, you get up in that Northeast country, it's not uncommon to find places that predate the American Revolution.
Yeah, where I was staying in Vermont was in a 1789 house with an 1843 addition to it, and then the house behind it, 4-room building, that was from the 1700s as well. So it's normal. And there is actually just over that way was the birthplace of the Navy. I didn't realize that so far inland were the Revolutionary War, but there's Lake Champlain right there, and that's why they were building ships.
Is that the area of like Fort Ticonderoga
Yeah,
in that
yeah,
country? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
Beautiful.
I didn't associate that either.
Yeah, in fact, I watched a fireworks show right on that lake, thinking there were actual Revolutionary War activity right here on these waters, and we're watching fireworks. How perfect was that?
Well, for fans of Jim Hinckley's America, I have this obsession with the forgotten cousin of Route 66, which is US 6, the highway that seems to go nowhere on purpose. And I've explored most of that highway from Ohio out to California. But the east, what section of US 6 did you get to explore during your trip?
That would have been New York.
Okay.
So I was heading north and then caught the 6 in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and so from Scranton and then into New York was the 6, if I recall correctly.
That'd be the Grand Army of the Republic Highway back in that part of the country was the designation for US 6. Why there was a reference to the Civil War, I don't have a clue. For those who aren't familiar, US 6 was developed over a period. It was one of the original highways, but they kept extending it for quite a few years. Eventually, it ended up going from Cape Cod, Massachusetts to Long Beach, California. And it has the distinction of being the last U.S. highway to be fully paved. It was like 1952 before that highway was fully paved. So, what other great highways did you find up there that we need to know about?
Ooh, I would say 220, US 220. So on my way back, I took just from the New York Pennsylvania border, US 220 down to I think down to Harrisburg or something like that. But just this northern half of Pennsylvania was just incredible. In fact, I could have taken 220 all the way down to North Carolina, which was where I needed to go before I went home. But I wanted to hit more of US 11, more of US 15, because they were. It's where I found the cool diners, and whereas like 220 is a beautiful rural route. So I'm just making choices. What do I want to see? Do I want to see some cool old neon signs? Do I want to see beautiful hills and mountains and trees? I tried to mix both, really.
I always find your adventures. I'm a follower of your both on Patreon and YouTube. I like your adventures always fascinate me. You're the exact opposite of the traveler that's in search of boutique hotels and 5-star resorts. I like the way that you experience things. Pitching a tent in a long closed motel, like at the Shamrock Court. Your stays out in Amboy, I found pretty intriguing. Can you imagine? You mentioned before how hot it was out there in Amboy.
Oh,
Isn't it amazing that people lived out there on purpose in the first place? And second of all, can you imagine traveling that road like in a Model T?
oh. Well, yeah. I suppose they do that at night, but boy, that's not really safe either.
I
I
bet it was
just can't
pretty
imagine.
pretty quiet stay out in Amboy, I assume.
Well, yes and no. You've got the railway, so you've got trains coming. In fact, I would hear a train coming from one direction and then one from the other, and I can tell which direction they were because they always have to honk their horn, short, short, long, short, or no, long, long, short, long, to say, hey, we're coming up to a crossing here. And so I could tell which way we were coming. But so a single train, you would hear it for 4 minutes, even though it's traveling very quickly. There's no other sound, so you hear these trains. And then if there's a train at the siding there, it's just running the engine. So I imagine Amboy was, even in the days of it having operating businesses, was loud more so from the train than from.
I'll give you a little perspective here, if folks, if you're familiar with Amboy or not. It's in the middle of the Mojave Desert. This is Edsel Ford, and if you're not familiar with Edsel, we're not talking about the car that looks like a Buick sucking a lemon. It's Edsel Ford, Henry Ford's son, and this is his travel journal, dated Saturday, July 17th and 18th, 1915, Needles, California. All had various things to do to prepare the cars. Got drive shaft from express office, bought a tire, repaired tubes, bought some clothing. We started west at 6:15 p.m. We travel in a procession of 8 cars, a Jeffrey, 2 Fords, 2 Chalmers, 2 Stutz, and a Cadillac. 30 miles out, the Chalmers broke a spring. The roads in the desert were surprisingly fair. Now, isn't that interesting? The roads are good, he says, but yet they were good enough to break a spring. Yeah. Stopped for midnight lunch, played phonograph while fixing a tire. These guys are traveling with a phonograph and records. Yeah, that's bizarre. Stopped at Ludlow for gas, had to wake up the Desert Queen to get it. Paid 78 cents a gallon. To put that in perspective, when he started this trip, he was paying 16 cents a gallon in Detroit. Arrived in Barstow at 7 a.m. No trouble on desert. Run to Barstow, 166 miles. That's 6:15 at night to 7 in the morning, 168 miles. Wow.
Have you driven some of that original 66 where it's just sand and dirt over by Amboy?
Yeah, and even south, down around, if you go south of Cadiz Summit, the original town of Cadiz and Danby, which is south on the National Old Trails Road over by the tracks. Yeah, I have been down in that country. In fact, I had the distinct pleasure some years ago of helping the historic 66, the historic automobile. Gosh, I can't remember their moniker, but they were recreating Edsel Ford's trip, and they were following as much of the original road as they could in a 1915 Ford. So it was pretty, yeah, a bit of time travel down there, pushing cars through the sand and whatnot.
I have pretty good ground clearance, and I bottomed out a couple times on that road. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah. So you piqued my interest a while ago. You were talking about finding some diners on your recent trip in the Northeast. Any Valentine diners by chance?
No, I don't believe so. But they were like those streamline metal diners. I don't think they were like the Valentine ones, but of that ilk, certainly. I don't know. I guess they could have. I don't think they were. I have some pictures on my Facebook. You can see.
Very good.
But these are diners that have been in that community since probably the 50s or the 40s, and they've got the neon sign. Some of them do, and there's the old motels that are probably now, weekly rentals or whatever. So it's not very different from Route 66 at all. So you find these U.S. highways that are far enough from the interstate where they are still the main travel road for many people, and the businesses thrive. It's wonderful to see.
You know, the difference between other two lanes and Route 66 is the people. Route 66 is truly a linear community and a long, small town. It's the infectious passion, enthusiasm. You'll find it on Route 66, but it's on other highways, but it seems to be in pockets instead of a linear corridor.
Right, right.
I noticed on Facebook you found an interesting town in North Carolina.
Ah, yes.
It caused me to laugh
Yeah.
extensively, and I
So you
still smile.
you remember that disco song, uh, "Funky Town"?
Yes.
I wonder if we need to do a version dedicated to this town in North Carolina, Horneytown.
Horneytown, USA.
Yeah,
Uh,
why don't you take me to Horneytown? What a great name! Well, it turns out that it was named, and no surprise, off of a family name, Horney, Horney, and that makes me think of the Wayne's World, where the character says it's pronounced Horney.
I tell you what, that I don't know why juvenile humor. I guess that's why I love Uranus Fudge Company is
Oh,
juvenile humor. But I saw that and I thought, God, that's just fantastic. Can you imagine telling people where you're from?
oh, I would buy property just to have an address there.
Hornytown, North Carolina. Oh my gosh.
People
Eh,
think you're broken, you know.
yeah, I guess you could follow. You mentioned Highway 66. Is that a state highway in Hornytown?
Yes. God, it's hard to keep a straight face when you said it. Yeah, it's North Carolina 66. Uh,
So you can follow 66 to Hornytown.
yeah, sounds like something Harley Russell would say.
Well, we don't need to give Harley down there in Eric, Oklahoma, any ideas. That boy has plenty as it is.
There's also 666 in Virginia. I drove past that. Again, it was state highway. Uh, and well, you remember, um, well, you mentioned the cousin of Route 66, US 6. What about the devil worshipping sister? Uh, Route
We
666 out of Gallup. Have you ever taken that?
Yeah, it US 66 is now, I believe, 191. They changed it because people were stealing the signs, all kinds of problems. But that is an incredibly beautiful drive, especially from Morenci, the old mining town of Morenci, Arizona, along the New Mexico border, up to Alpine, Arizona, and in that country. If you ever get a chance, that is an absolute stunning drive, and it'll surprise people that you're in Arizona. You get up around Hannigan's Meadow, and you're so up high up in the mountains. They actually have dog sled races in the wintertime up there. It's just beautiful, and it's the road is like a can full of worms. It's just full of twists and turns, and but yeah, Highway 666.
I took it north from Gallup because we were headed up to Mesa Verde National Park. Boy, is that beautiful. And that's super high in elevation, too.
Yeah, the interstate highway is a necessary evil. Just recently, I had to get back from Tulsa, Oklahoma, in a hurry, so I only had 2 days to get from Tulsa to Kingman. And I'm old enough. When I was driving trucks in the 70s, it was still Route 66 in places and I-40 in other places. So I know what it was like to drive the old two lanes when that's all we had. So the interstate is a necessary evil. But if you really want to discover America and what makes this country unique and special, and find out that we're not as divided as people want us to believe we are, you take the two-lane highway and you can really experience America. But
I, I'm sorry, go on.
no, go ahead, Nolan.
I was going to say, when I took US 29 on my way back, I got that feeling of that that transition era, like Route 66 in the 50s and the 60s, where okay, it's four lane divided highway. Sometimes it's like an interstate with exits. Sometimes there's crossroads. Sometimes there's actual stoplights. And there's not too many roads that are like that are heavily traveled, but that one certainly was. I was surprised how much traffic was on US 29. The thing is, there isn't really an interstate that would be the main choice. So that's why I like the US highways that parallel an interstate, because hey, the interstate gets all the traffic, and now you get to enjoy the best of both worlds when like US 11. I took a lot of US 11 on the trip, and that I think it's like 81. Yeah, I-81, it parallels. So you get all the cool old diners. Like I stayed at, not stayed, I had breakfast at Pink Cadillac Diner. I mean, this place could have been on Route 66. So I'm finding these places aren't at all much different from your Lincoln highways and your Route 66s and so forth.
I gotta share this. Denny Gibson's with us this morning, and Denny is he's written some very interesting books about the Lincoln Highway and traveling in the 1920s with Model Ts. He says, I once knew a girl who was originally from Horneytown, North Carolina, and she lived for a while in Blue Ball, Ohio.
Oh boy.
God, well, this conversation's going south so damn fast. Um, I'll just draw your own conclusions here, guys.
Well, there is a place that would be between North Carolina and Ohio. I suppose you could drive through a certain place in Pennsylvania.
Continue.
Intercourse, Pennsylvania. It's right off the Lincoln Highway, maybe 2 miles or something.
Oh no, 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 no. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, the two-lane highways that parallel the interstate. That was kind of the essence of the movie Psycho. Is the new highway had come through, bypassed the old highway, and there was Norman Bates with his little motel, and got the occasional traffic.
I stayed at a really cute motel on US 29 in Virginia. Wasn't that old. I'm thinking maybe 1969, 70 or something. But it's right on the US highway. So you really get that feel of, oh, this is a mom and pop motel, and people would pull over. And it was a cool little town. There's only 500 people in this town, yet I found an Indian restaurant, and a bookstore was kind of like the self-described hippie bookstore, with a coffee shop, and there was a live reggae band
Oh, God.
in rural Virginia in a town of 500 people.
What was that?
So
What town was this, Nolan?
Lovingston, Virginia.
You see, this is what we're talking about. People try to sell us on the idea that we're all divided here, but America is just rich and diverse, and that we have so much in common. One of the things that intrigued me, you mentioned the Indian restaurant. When I was truck driving, there was a lot of the independent truck stops, and they all like Rip Griffins and different ones had their own restaurants. And then you started getting into Black Bear Diner and Denny's, and things started taking over the restaurants in the truck stops. My recent trip to Oklahoma, I noticed that a lot of the truck stops now have Indian restaurants.
Yep.
Yeah, things are definitely changing.
Yeah, there's a large Indian population in the truck driving
Yeah.
industry. So that's the main people that they're serving. But those of us that love Indian food are like, hey, I'm in a rural. What's that town? Route 66 town that has the blanking right now. It's like almost a ghost town. At any rate, if you go on the original route that goes south from town, there's an Indian restaurant right in the truck stop. So here I am having Indian food in a ghost town in Oklahoma. I mean, how great is that?
Yeah, I tell you, lots of interesting things taking place out there and you find on the open road. But the old 2-lane highways, what makes them nice today is, for the most part, you can drive them because you want to and you enjoy them. You used to, like, you take the pre 52 alignment of Route 66 up through Oatman. I believe it was 1939. The state highway department clocked 1 million vehicles in 12 months on that road. It's incomprehensible uh, to think like that. And yeah, the interstate highway is a must because
Well, yeah, and then we have roads like the Blue Ridge Parkway and the Skyline Road. I took both of those to get to New York. So kind of mixed U.S. highways. I mean, you have to do the Blue Ridge Parkway. It's incredible, the scenery. It's slow, but it's worth it.
that's a scenic byway. Does that was that put in, as I recall, like the 1930s?
That sounds about right. Yeah,
So,
it's amazing, and it's free. Now, on the northern terminus, then it becomes Skyline Drive essentially, and now you're in Shenandoah National Park. So I just went and bought the year long pass. I'm sure I'll go to other national
yeah.
parks. But yeah, I mean it's just incredible, the views, because you're at the top of the mountains, and so you're seeing all the foothills in either direction. Just incredible.
What one of the projects that I've envisioned for a long time is doing a series of travels. Like, there's a fellow, you can find him on Facebook. He goes by the name of Tebow Barnes, and he's a passionate Model A enthusiast. And he doesn't just collect; he repairs and drives long distances. Sounds like some of these highways that you found would be suitable for somebody as crazy as me that wants to drive the country in a Model A Ford.
Well, hey, my buddy who I stayed with up in Vermont, he has a 1923 Model T, and he rides it into town. Great.
I know a fella in a little town. He has an antique store, and his primary transportation, he's an elderly gentleman, somewhere between 60 and 200 years old. And he has a Model T depot hack and a Model A pickup. And he has a tendency to drink a bit after work. And I asked him about, aren't you worried about like getting stopped by the police? And he says, no. He says, they can't tell whether I'm drunk or sober because you can't drive these things in a straight line. And I never drive over 25 anyway. Uh, I'm getting a lot of people asking me on the reason I brought this up about 2-lane highways, because how would somebody from the Northeast get to Route 66 if they were planning to drive Route 66 in a vintage car? And I'm getting a lot of people that's looking at driving Route 66 for the Centennial with vintage cars. So that's one reason I was kind of curious.
Well, the 6 actually makes a lot of sense, because
Yeah,
that's just east-west across the top of Pennsylvania. So wherever they are in the Northeast, they could pick up that there. There's several roads, if they're like by New York, Eastern New York, like US 9, US 4. I took both of those. Those were great. And then they could just go to, Chicago. I mean, 6 goes just south of Chicago, just like going
through
to Philly.
Joliet, I believe, doesn't it? Or is
Yeah,
that,
yeah. Yeah, it goes
or
through
is,
Joliet, and it's also by it's basically the Lincoln Highway is in the same area right there.
Denny would be our resident Lincoln Highway expert here that's with us today.
You know, you said before, actually, you've said this several times, that 6 seems to go nowhere on purpose, but I don't know if that's really true. I think it's really, really weird what it did and does in California and all that. But out east, I mean, it's going through important towns as well as connecting the smaller towns. So perhaps if it's avoiding anything, it's trying to, avoid the traffic of major cities so people can, continue on their way. But, when I was taking it, I'm like, oh, it turns this way and it goes through Hawley, Pennsylvania or Hawley, New York. I forget which state, but these cute little towns. And you're like, okay, this makes sense. This highway is serving all these small towns, but it also goes to Scranton, you know?
Well, what I mean by missing a lot of the places, if you look at America in that period, mid 20s and 30s, for example, look how US 6 uh, kind of turns from Cape Cod, it kind of drops down towards New York City, but it misses New York City by like 40 miles.
Mm-hmm.
It misses Chicago by something like a dozen miles. Uh,
And I
you
think
know,
that's the same logic as the Lincoln Highway is that
mm,
we can have these official feeder routes, but why do we need to pull this highway into this large city? I mean, it goes through Omaha, so it's not like it doesn't go through, and Denver. But
yeah.
no, but I think as far as like what you're saying about New York and Chicago, yeah, absolutely, because there's other roads that can take you into those, and that would just
Well,
slow down.
there again, my obsession with US 6 continues. But in the West, when you consider the cars of the period, US 6 is the highest US highway, crossing Loveland Pass in Colorado. But if they just would have went north, or especially north, by 60 miles, they could have cut that elevation by thousands of feet. Uh,
Hmm.
it goes across to the absolute worst part of Nevada. Even in the 1920s, it was just absolutely desolate, and it misses Salt Lake City. You've crossed Utah. You're going through this desolate area. I suppose that's one reason it was the last U.S. highway to be paved. That was at the
Mhm.
Nevada Utah border, about 1952. It was still gravel.
Hmm.
Kind of odd. You've been exploring quite a lot in the Carolinas too, South Carolina, North Carolina. Any good discoveries down that way?
Yeah, I'd say was it 321 or something? There's a highway that essentially served as what I-95 serves today. Like if I wanted to go up to New York City or up to Vermont, I could take interstates the whole way. I would take 85 and take basically 95, I-95 pretty much the whole way. And I-95 goes all the way down to what, Miami, Florida. But before the interstate, what highway did they take? And it was this, I'm thinking 301. I'd have to take a look at my notes, but um, I was just coming up from Charleston one day. I live in the like northwest corner of the state. Uh, they call it the upstate because we're as far inland as you can go. And just exploring different roads, and I'm finding all these old motels and great signs. I'm like, whoa! And I looked into it, and apparently this was the road that most people took when they went on vacation. When the folks that lived up north, they would come and take this road. I'm like, wow, this makes perfect sense. So you kind of have like this East Coast Route 66, if you
Are you having issues in your neck of the woods with collectors gobbling up the neon signs? Are they disappearing from the roadside?
will. Ooh, to be honest, I don't really pay attention to that much of who is getting them or if they're getting thrown away.
Are they disappearing? You think along the highway?
I haven't noticed anything
Okay.
disappear, but maybe I just forgot about.
Yeah.
But we've got some really great neon signs in Spartanburg. There's this place called the Sugar and Spice Drive-In. It has this arrow, the typical bold arrow, and it's a beautiful sign. And when people drive through, everyone takes a picture of that one. I remember seeing one on Nick Gerlich's page. I'm like, hey, you were in Spartanburg. You didn't say hi. One of those things. our baseball team that we're getting next year uses that sign as a part of their logo. So it's very iconic. We've got an old Krispy Kreme. That sign is super cool. So,
I,
and
you
we
know,
even
I,
got
I really want to encourage people to take road trips, and it's not as expensive as people think, depending on, of course, how you travel. You know, if it's that's the difference, depending on how you travel. Uh, and you, it takes us full circle. You have an interesting way of travel with preferring a tent quite often, I notice. But that puts you in some very unique places at the end of the day.
yeah,
I noticed you stayed out near Ash Fork, Arizona, along
yeah,
one of the original alignments of Route 66.
yeah, yeah. That's just this open space. People boondock. It's you can't tell if it's BLM land or if it's just someone's property that they don't care. It's really weird. But so many people boondock at that exit, and you can't tell from the ground that Route's original 66 went through it, but you can see the roadbed from satellite photos. So I just did a little pin on Google Maps and then drove to it. I'm like, wow, nobody's camping next to me. I'm gonna pretend I'm camping right along original 66, like it's 1927 or something.
Would that be let's see, near Ash Fork, somewhere around Welsh Road by chance?
It's the Welch Road exit. Yep.
Okay. Uh, I got folks. I got something to share with you, and this might have sparked Nolan for another visit here. Welsh
Oh,
Road exit. There's two alignments of Route 66 on the north side of I-40, and you can look this up on the internet. There's also a place called the Steel Dam, right? That's accessed one of those old alignments of Route 66. You would turn off at Welsh Road and then continue west. The railroad built some of these prefab bolt together steel dams. And as far as I know, this may be the last one in existence. These were built in the late 19th century. And if you go east on off Welsh Road along Route 66, the two alignments kind of run parallel. The first Forest Service road you run to, if you turn north, which would be going left, you'll drive across the sand wash. It's not too bad. You'll come to a huge platform and a massive trash dump. That was Welsh Railroad Station. And if you follow that rail bed east on a beautiful hike, 2.5, 3 miles, you'll come to the 1880s Johnson Canyon Railroad Tunnel.
wow.
That is spectacular. It's got cut stone faces on both sides, and the interior is stone up to about 6 feet, and then it's riveted iron ceiling through the whole tunnel. It's just absolutely beautiful. That Welsh Road area is really spectacular. Lots to see in that area.
The weather is nice too because you're high enough in elevation. So in the summer, it's you know pretty manageable.
Yeah. So where did you pitch your tent in Amboy?
Um, the first time was at the Amboy crater. There's a parking lot right there,
Uh huh.
and there's it's all BLM land, so you can just put the tent up wherever. I put it close to the outhouses in case I had to go in the middle of the night or something. Plus, I could have my car right there. The second time, I actually stayed in one of the rooms. I didn't actually have a tent.
Okay.
There's had a cot and a fan, but that was not enough. I just it was so hot in there that I just had to run to my car in the middle of the night a few times and just sit in that AC and run the AC for a bit and go back in there. Yeah, I had a little light, a cot, and a fan, and there's no running water. So, but they do have those portable toilets. over by the cafe. So
Well, Kyle Okura, I understand, is really picking up where his father left off. Uh, Chris Tuttle from Arizona Podcast could probably give us more updates on that. Chris has been doing some great Mother Road Minute programs, and of course has the Arizona Podcast. But Amboy, I guess they're finally getting their septic system in order, and they're finally really moving ahead with plans to reopen the old motel out there in Amboy. And
from what I
I'll be
understand, from what I understand, they're just doing the cottages that are the older cottages. I
uh-huh,
don't think they're renovating the motel behind it because
not
that's a
yet.
ton of rooms.
Yeah. I just recently I've been having communication with a fellow. He's in his late 70s, early 80s now. He actually worked at the Ludlow Garage, and he worked in Amboy for a while. And he married the daughter of the people who owned Cadiz Summit, and had some pretty good stories I've been collecting. Chris Tuttle just said the sewer, electric, and water to cottages is getting close to being ready at Roy's. You know, that's an exciting development. I will be curious to see who stays out there on purpose because that's a pretty damn remote location.
Well, watching the traffic, there is a ton of traffic that comes from the south.
29 Palms, yeah.
In Palm. So you've got that. You've got Joshua Tree National Park. And so you've got this north-south traffic that has to go through Amboy to get up to Kilbecker Road to get to the interstate. So it's really interesting. Almost all the traffic is on that road and not 66. You
Uh,
could stand in the middle of 66 and no one will drive by it for 15
oh,
minutes.
no. Oh, no, no. Chris Tuttle from Arizona Podcast says that they're got a target they're trying to open by the centennial. And he's hoping to do a program from Amboy out there at one of the cottages.
That'd be awesome.
Speaking of Kelbaker Road, since we're talking road trips, we kind of deviated from our conversation about the Northeast. We ended up wandering around the desert here, but
Well, we're a couple of desert rats, so.
dry roasted nuts. Yes.
Ah,
Uh, North of I-40 on Kelbaker Road. Have you ever gone up through Kelso?
I've always wanted to, but I have not.
Kelso is a fascinating. It's a ghost town. There's a few buildings left, but they have renovated the beautiful train depot and cafe uh, as the visitor center for the Mojave National Preserve, and it's just an absolutely wonderful place. Speaking of places in the middle of nowhere, uh, but that's a great pit stop.
Having grown up in Las Vegas and going to either L.A. or say Phoenix, I never had a reason to take that part of Route 66. I never had a reason to go directly south through Kelso. It was just so far out of the way. I just could never justify it. You know, but that was when I was living there. Like, okay, I need to go to Phoenix for blah blah blah, or go to LA for blah blah blah. So yeah, strangely enough, that strip of 66 was the last stretch I'd ever driven of 66, even though I lived relatively close to it.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting area out there. The Goff's Schoolhouse. I'll be they're doing their annual rendezvous fundraising, and I'll be their featured speaker out there. I think it's October 12th, and that's another place that gets overlooked a lot because it's remote. But they've done a tremendous job. Dennis Cassaber, who recently passed away, putting that together. It's a wonderful museum and complex. Chris Tuttle also recommends Nipton out there in the desert.
Okay.
Nipton has a connection with some Hollywood people. Mary Pickford had a big ranch out there towards Nipton. and hosted a lot of celebrities and movie stars over the years. Filmed some movies out that way too, I understand, just for filling your head with useless knowledge that no knowledge at all. It would be really remiss of me, Nolan, during our visit, if I didn't ask how your Route 66 musical composition is going.
It's going well. I've completed the AD 1926 movement. That's the first an opening movement that reflects the music of the time, but also just the sounds. You hear a little train whistle and uh, railroad sounds, and your car brakes, and in the middle of it, and then I try to really capture those early years of '66. I just completed the 26 gas stations movement. I found this interesting. 5 out of the 6 gas station bells that I recorded along 66 all were exactly the same pitch. So I think everyone's using the same model, same company, same model. So what I did is I analyzed what the frequencies of that and assigned uh, instruments, and you hear like just right at the beginning, like ding 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 ding. It sounds like a gas station bell. It's pretty incredible. Um, and then what else? Desert 66. I've completed. That's the 6th movement. I'm working on 66 ghost towns right now, and that's got all sorts of kind of creaky, empty sounds that one finds at, say, Valentine, Arizona. Um, so those are the ones that are closest. The others I have ideas for, but just sketches, but nothing complete. Um, so I'm less than halfway done, but and I think that's fine. I don't think I need to have all 8 done right now because I'm pretty much getting the same thing from all the conductors I've spoken with so far. Is wow, I don't think I can commit a whole hour long piece on the concert, but I could do 1 or 2 movements. You know, so I'm it maybe end up getting premiered as one movement in this city, this movement in another. We shall see. Um, but then again, there was one orchestra that said, "Hey, why don't we wait to the following year and let's do the entire thing?" I'm like, okay. So
So, you're planning on the major debut for the Centennial?
I'm I'm planning for previews in 2025. I want to build them as a preview, and then any performance in 2026 as a co-premiere, regardless of location or. So okay, and that's because see, orchestras they're on a fall spring schedule, like a school schedule would be, right? So you've got the 24-25 season that's starting in a month. You've got the 25-26 season, and then you have the 26-27 season. So there's 3 possibilities, right? Some for previews, some for actual premieres. And I think that I think a 2027 performance is just as good because if you think about it, if Route 66 wasn't official until November 11th, 1926, the first time it was practical to travel a lot of 66 was in 2027, right? People would have waited until April, May.
Well, a lot of people, unfortunately, are looking at the Centennial as a destination, and they should be looking at it as the beginning of the countdown to the bicentennial. It's keeping that road going. Like I say, we've talked about this before, but my knowledge of music composition and what you're trying to accomplish, I appreciate good music, but my understanding of how it's created and developed and done is very similar to what a frog has knowledge of tap dancing. It's pretty limited, but I find your projects quite fascinating. Your YouTube channel we talked about before is at Route 66 Suite by Nolan Stolz, correct?
Yes, got to put that at in there.
Okay, at Route 66 Suite. I really recommend this for folks I think it's not only inspire road trips, but you've got so much fascinating information on places that, well, just literally have been lost, places that have been forgotten. And I won't teach you about Mud College because we've gone on to other things now, like Horneytown, North Carolina. But videos and like spending time in San Juan, New Mexico. I don't think you don't hear people drive through San Juan on 66, but people don't spend time there to explore, and they can explore it vicariously through your videos.
Hey, San Juan, you can camp in that park for free. I did that. I got some Indian food from the gas station at in San Juan. So you can have Indian food and camp in San Juan. I mean, how cool and bizarre is that? It's great.
Cool and bizarre. I like that. There's some sort of a marketing thing there. I'm not sure yet what that means. Nolan, thank you so much for taking time today for doing this, and I really appreciate since so much of what we do is Route 66 centered. I, for one, am most appreciative of uh, your work on Route 66, not just the musical composition, but documenting these places and encouraging people through your short videos. I find I really enjoy that, and I'm very appreciative. But thank you for taking time today to share some of this. And we're going to have to, yeah, we're gonna, you've inspired me to consider more of a Northeast trip because that's been really lacking in my road trip education. But you've given me
Yeah,
incentive for that as well.
there's a lot of potential there. You've got all those tollways, the interstate tollways. You stay off of those, and all of a sudden you go through these really old towns, and the architecture is incredible. It's just beautiful. So, like that town I mentioned in that Livingston, like 500 people, but they have over 100 buildings on the historic registry.
That. There you go. Well, that tells you two things. If the buildings are on the National Register, that means they have strong community spirit, that they understand and value what they have. It also tells you the place is unique, and the fact that they have a bookstore. They just went up dramatically in my book.
Yeah.
Any place with a bookstore, that's sorely needed.
Yep.
Uh, did you have one specific place on this trip that really grabbed your attention? That just really stood out?
Uh, I would go with Troy, New York. So this is on the east side of the river, and Albany is on the west side and a little bit to the south. But it's not like a suburb. It really has its own character. Used to have the textile industry, um, and so you have these awesome brick buildings and wood buildings. So these, again, architecture from the 19th century is totally normal. And then you have these former textile factories that looks like they've been turned into um, apartments, condos, that sort of thing. But I would encourage you to just go on Google Maps, look at US 4 through Troy, and just drop the little guy in different places. And you'll see what I saw, like just really neat looking residential neighborhoods and very hip remodeled places. Probably has a lot to do with the what's there, the RPI, the university that's there. And so there's this revitalization that you feel. It still feels like that's an old blue collar town, but that has moved on to its next stage. So I don't know. I would say take your little Google Map guy and explore US4, and I think you'll see what I mean.
I've got a couple of little things I want to throw out for everybody, and I'm working on some things, and it ties in with this. Uh, Lustron Homes. Is anybody familiar with Lustron Homes? In your travels, and I understand there's a few of these in the Northeast. Most of them are in Ohio, St. Louis, and the Northeast area. These were built in the late 1940s. The same fellow who built steel gas stations in the 30s, the prefab gas stations with the steel panels, porcelain. After the war, to meet the housing shortage, he started manufacturing these prefab steel houses. They are completely steel. The shingles, the roofing, the walls, interior, exterior, all the doors, cabinets, everything is steel. And I'm looking for some of these houses. If you happen to trip across them, please let me know. And I'll post when I post I'll do a blog post with some of these things that we talked about today, as well as my quest for Lustron Homes. I'll get you some teasers up on that. And unrelated to what Nolan and I have been talking about this morning, I wanted to give you an update on my research into the Abernathy brothers. I talked about these two amazing young men a few weeks ago who made epic journeys across the United States by horse, motorcycle, and car by themselves at the ages of like 10 and 5 and 12 and 7. Their father, Jack Abernathy, I have discovered was an associate of Teddy Roosevelt, and he was known for capturing wolves alive. Apparently, he would run them down with his horse, jump off his horse, grab the wolf, and jam his fist into their throat. I'll have more information on Jack Abernathy pretty soon as well. With that said, Nolan, again, thank you. And I want to thank everybody who joined us this morning. I hope we encouraged you to get out wherever you live. Take a road trip. Discover. I should have known. Thank you, Denny. Denny says the Lustron homes were built in Ohio. I want to thank everybody who joined us this morning. Thanks for chiming in. We'll get this published pretty soon with some information. We'll have links in our blog post about today's program to Nolan's YouTube channel and ways that you can kind of lend a hand, making sure the suite gets published. And then next week, we're going to have some fun. We're going to be talking with David Brenner. And he is the owner of the Roadrunner Lodge in Tucumcari, New Mexico. But this is a story, it's inspirational for a lot of reasons. David has quite a story about taking on a literally condemned property, moving from the big city to a place like Tucumcari, New Mexico, and passionately dedicating himself. He has transformed this motel into an award-winning property. And in the process, really contributed to the revitalization of Tucumcari. I think you're going to find this really an inspirational program next week. Meanwhile, I have questions about what's Jim going to be doing. Well, right now on the calendar, I'm doing things here in the Kingman area. Phase 2 of the Kingman Historic District walking tour developed by Kingman Main Street is done. The website has been expanded dramatically. It's not just now the walking tour, but it's a planning tool if you're visiting Kingman. And it's really great. Take a look. It's kingman.tours is the website. I think you'll be very, very impressed with that. I'm meeting with some tour groups, doing some programs. Travel schedule, October, I'll be on the road heading east. After Goff's, I'll be attending the Miles of Possibility Conference in Edwardsville, Illinois. And I'm finalizing arrangements to speak at the Missouri History Museum in St. Louis in Forest Park. And I'll keep everybody updated and apprised on that as well. But until we meet again, my friends, I guess we'll bid adios. Mr. Nolan, thank you very much. Keep up the good work, and keep turning up those interesting places. And well, keep us apprised of updates from Horneytown if you get a chance.
I hope I hope that's literal and not a metaphor.
I'm gonna. I'm not going there. I'm not going there either. Yeah, Maggie, it's kingman.tours. That's the website. Uh, but hey, thank you so much. Your work is greatly appreciated. It fills in a lot of holes for folks in the history and the road trip inspiration. So it's greatly appreciated. Uh, Arizona podcast, we'll give a shout out to those folks too. If you check out the Mother Road Minute as well as the Arizona podcast, I think you'd enjoy both of those as well. My friends, until we meet again, I will bid you adios with a little music from Joe, Woody, and the boys, the road crew. And if you got ideas for programs, drop me a note.
Say hello to a new friend.
And like I say, my friends,
road.
Until we meet again,
Take a 2-lane
vaya
trip
con Dios.
of memories into mysteries unknown. Come along for the ride. Jim Hinckley's America. Jim Hinckley's America.
Hey, one final note here. Denny Gibson just posted a little note. The Ohio State Museum has a Lustron home on display. Well, Denny, now you've done it. It looks like I've got to travel to Ohio this year. Take a gander. Like I say, I'll post a link. But these Lustron homes, it's another one of the great rabbit holes that I've allowed myself to get pulled into. My friends, take care. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.